The Moretti family's daughter was born deaf at least. That's what everyone had been repeating for 8 years, like a sentence set in stone. Renowned doctors, expensive clinics, international trips, complex exams. Nothing changed the fact that this child lived in a world without sound. Until the day a new au pair from another country, with more courage than certainty, noticed something that no one had noticed in almost a decade. The simple gesture she made that late afternoon would change everything, including the fate of that house, so beautiful on the outside and so silent on the inside. If stories like this resonate with you, take a deep breath, get comfortable, and if you'd like to follow other exciting stories like this one, go ahead and discreetly subscribe to the channel. Now, let's step inside the Moretti mansion together and see how a detail ignored by many became the turning point in a young girl's life. Tessa was 24 years old when she landed at Boston Airport with her old suitcase dragging on the floor. A folder full of crumpled documents and English that still stumbled over the simplest words. The icy October wind cut her face as she tried to mentally repeat the au pair agency's instructions, mixing anxiety with hope. Behind her, Brazil seemed too far away. Ahead, the promise of a year in a wealthy home, caring for a single child, sounded like a chance to start over after so many closed doors. Fear, however, walked hand in hand with this opportunity. The black van that parked in front of the airport looked like something out of a movie, with tinted windows and a driver who didn't say more than necessary. A few minutes later, the door opened and Helena Moretti appeared. Impeccable in a light coat, her hair tied back, a serious face like someone who solves problems before they even arise. "Are you Tessa?" she asked, without smiling. The young woman simply nodded, swallowing hard, feeling that simple yes would change her whole life. The drive to the mansion was silent, broken only by the distant sound of the GPS and the traffic outside. When the electronic gate opened, Tessa felt like she was entering another world. The grounds seemed endless, with aligned trees, meticulously manicured gardens, and an elegant house with large windows reflecting the gray sky. There were no toys on the lawn, no overturned bicycles, no laughter echoing from anywhere. Just too much perfection. Helena walked ahead, explaining rules as if reciting a script. Schedules, chores, limits. And then, she stopped before a white door in the second-floor hallway, took a deep breath, and said, without looking at Tessa, "This is Leah's room. She's 8 years old. She was born deaf." The phrase came out like an old, heavy diagnosis, repeated so many times that it had lost all hope. When Helena opened the door, Tessa saw the girl sitting on the floor, surrounded by dolls, engrossed in a silent game. Leah had enormous, curious, but tired eyes, as if the world had already demanded too much of her. And, while playing with a doll's hair, the girl brought her right hand to her own ear, pressing it gently, as if trying to alleviate a constant pain. The gesture lasted only a few seconds, but it was enough to imprint an alert in the au pair's heart. That first night, lying in the guest room, Tessa could barely sleep. The white ceiling seemed to stare back at her, reminding her of everything she had left behind and everything she didn't yet know in this new country. But, above all worries, a scene kept repeating in her mind, Leah's small hand pressing against her ear, the furrowed brow, the silence of that house. Something there didn't make sense. She thought of her younger sister, who touched her ear in the same way years before they discovered a serious infection. And, even trying to push that memory away, a phrase echoed within her: "Pay attention." The first few days quickly revealed that the Moretti household functioned like a perfectly controlled machine. There were fixed schedules for everything: waking up, studying, eating, resting. The atmosphere was organized, but cold, as if any display of emotion could disrupt that carefully constructed system. Leah moved around the house like a sweet ghost, always present but never fully seen. The girl communicated with some basic signs taught by therapists, but the connection with her parents seemed limited to mechanical gestures and quick, almost administrative glances. Tessa, on the other hand, observed every detail with the sensitivity of someone who knows what it's like to grow up missing someone who truly looks at you. She noticed that Laya preferred to stay near the windows, watching the trees sway in the wind, as if searching for sounds she couldn't hear. She noticed that she startled slightly when someone dropped something heavy in the distance, as if a distant echo timidly reached her. And she noticed, above all, that the girl put her hand to her right ear several times a day, as if there were a permanent discomfort there that no one was taking seriously. One morning, while they were drawing together on the playroom rug, Tessa accidentally dropped a pencil on the floor. It was a tiny, almost insignificant noise. But Leah's eyes moved too quickly in the direction of the sound, as if her body had picked up something her mind couldn't understand. The au pair froze. Completely deaf children don't react like that to tiny noises. It suggested that something was passing by, even if distorted. Tessa's heart raced, but she kept a neutral expression, not wanting to scare the girl. She simply kept that scene as a silent proof within herself. At dinner that night, the au pair ventured a careful question. "While serving water," she commented softly, "Leah seems very attentive to the movements. Has she had any recent hearing tests?" Helena put her cutlery down on the table, looking at Tessa with a gaze that mixed weariness and impatience. "My daughter was born deaf. This is nothing new in this house. We've consulted the best doctors, there's nothing to be done." The sentence came as a final point. Lorenzo, the father, remained silent, chewing slowly, as if he were far away. The message was clear: certain doors should not be opened. That night, Tessa cried, missing her family, the noise of the street, the mingled voices, the chaos of the life she had left behind. But along with the longing came a growing unease. She remembered her sister taking months to be seen by doctors, remembered hasty diagnoses, remembered a specialist who almost ignored the girl's pain until another, more attentive professional discovered a simple yet serious physical problem. What if Laya wasn't completely deaf? What if there was something inside blocking what the world insisted on declaring impossible? The question resonated too loudly to be ignored. As the weeks passed, something beautiful began to happen between Tessa and Leah. Unlike the previous staff, who treated the girl's routine as part of a protocol, the au pair decided to approach slowly, with respect and genuine curiosity. She started by leaving small, drawn notes, hearts, stars, simple figures that the child could understand visually. Then, she tried some signs, even though she was still confused by American Sign Language. Mixing improvised gestures with facial expressions, little by little, Leah responded, opening a space of trust that no one else had achieved. The two created their own code. Tapping their fingers twice on the table meant hello, drawing a small sun on paper meant I'm happy today, and placing their hands on their chests and closing them slightly indicated I'm scared. As this small shared universe grew, Leah's eyes seemed to gain a sparkle that wasn't present when Tessa arrived. The girl began searching the house for the au pair, pulling her by the hand to show her drawings, trying to imitate sounds with her mouth, even though none of them seemed to come out right. For Tessa, each attempt was a treasure. But not everyone viewed this closeness favorably. One Friday afternoon, while Tessa and Laya were putting together a puzzle on the living room floor, Helena entered without knocking and watched for a few seconds. The scene was gently beautiful, the girl laughing silently, Tessa making exaggerated faces, the two creating a connection that overflowed through their gaze. "You're having too much fun," commented the mother, with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Leah needs to stay focused on the activities proposed by the therapists, not on playing." The sentence cut through the air, like an invisible line separating what is permitted from what is dangerous. After that day, the little squabbles began. A comment about Tessa spending too much time in Laya's room. An observation about the au pair getting too emotionally involved. A disapproving look when the two hugged after some playful interaction. Helena seemed afraid of losing what little control she still believed she had over her daughter's life. Instead of getting closer to understand what was happening, she chose to distance herself even further, erecting a barrier made of rules and coldness. Lorenzo, as always, hid behind meetings and trips, accepting any decision his wife made in exchange for superficial peace. One night, in the kitchen, while washing a mug, Tessa overheard two employees whispering near the pantry. "Did you see how the new au pair thinks she's special? She's glued to the girl all the time? The lady of the house won't like that." The other replied with a mixture of pity and sarcasm. "They never last long here. They either quit or get fired. This one will just be another one." Tessa took a deep breath, trying not to let it affect her. But deep down, she felt fear. Fear of being fired. Fear of no longer being able to protect Leah. Fear that this child would once again become invisible within her own home. That night, before going to sleep, Tessa saw a faint light in the hallway. It was Leah, standing, leaning against the wall, holding a crumpled piece of paper. As she approached, the au pair noticed the drawing, two figures holding hands, one larger and one smaller. Below, in crooked letters, Leah had copied a name from the door sign, Tessa. The girl looked up, touched her own chest, and then pointed at the young woman as if to say, "You're mine." At that moment, everything became clear. She might even lose her job, but she was no longer going to pretend not to see the child's pain, and that would lead her to make the riskiest decision of her life. Sunday began with a strange weight in the air. The sky was cloudy, the wind colder than on previous days, and the house seemed even quieter than usual. Helena and Lorenzo left early for a work event, leaving a list of instructions on the kitchen counter. As if the routine could be controlled with millimeter precision by a piece of paper. Tessa read everything carefully, but her heart was elsewhere in Leah's room, where the girl woke up more irritable, touching her ear with painful insistence, wrinkling her face as if carrying something unbearable inside. Mid-morning, while organizing books on the shelf in her room, Tessa saw Leah drop one of her toys and bring both hands to her right ear, squeezing so hard that her fingers turned white. The girl cowered, breathing rapidly, her eyes filled with tears that wouldn't come out. As if she wasn't even allowed to cry completely. The au pair rushed to her, sat on the floor, and hugged her carefully, like someone holding something broken that could shatter with a sudden movement. "Does it hurt?" she asked in sign language. Leah nodded, collapsing into a silent sob that tore at Tessa's heart. That's when the young woman mustered her courage and decided to take a closer look. Very calmly, she took out her cell phone, turned on the flashlight, and gently asked the girl for permission. Leah hesitated, but ended up resting her head on Tessa's shoulder, closing her eyes as if surrendering to the little bit of safety she found. When the light entered the ear canal, the au pair held her breath. There it was again, a dark, dense, compacted mass, occupying a space that should never be filled in that way. It wasn't just simple earwax. It looked like something accumulated over the years, pressing down on everything around it. The past flashed back. Tessa's younger sister, at 5 years old, spent sleepless nights complaining of ear pain, until a more attentive doctor decided to investigate further and found a similar blockage, the result of neglected infections. A simple intervention changed everything back then. The fear of repeating the negligence now made Tessa's chest ache. She knew that if she ignored it, Leah would remain a prisoner in that bubble of silence and pain. But she also knew that if she tried to help and something went wrong, she could be accused, expelled, even held responsible for something serious. Tessa spent the rest of the afternoon wrestling with her own thoughts. On one side, the voice of prudence reminded her that she wasn't a doctor, that there was a family, an agency, a visa at stake. On the other, the voice of conscience pointed to an 8-year-old child who had already been ignored enough. In the end, she did what she always did when she didn't know where to turn. She sat on the edge of the bed, closed her eyes, and simply spoke to God in her simple way. "If I'm seeing what no one else has seen, show me what to do. But if I'm wrong, silence me. Just don't let me be a coward with this girl." And, deep down, the answer came in the form of a mixture of peace and courage. Late in the afternoon, Leah's pain worsened. Tessa found her sitting in the hallway, leaning against the wall, her body curled up, her hands trembling as she held her right ear. The girl had no strength to play, to draw, or to ask for anything. It was just pure pain. The au pair felt that this was the decisive moment. She grabbed the small first aid kit from the house, sterilized a simple instrument as she had learned years before from her sister, and took a deep breath until her hands felt steady. She sat down in front of Leah, looked her straight in the eyes, and made a single gesture. "Do you trust me?" Leah hesitated for a few seconds that felt like hours. Then, with a courage she perhaps didn't even know she possessed, she nodded slowly and rested her head in Tessa's lap. The young woman positioned the light from her cell phone, brought the instrument closer, and began to act with the delicacy of someone who knows they can't make a mistake. Every millimeter seemed risky, every movement demanded absolute focus. She managed to reach the dark mass, felt the resistance, pulled slowly, retreated, took a deep breath, tried again. Until, suddenly, something detached and slipped out, falling into the palm of her hand. It was bigger than she had imagined, older than any hasty diagnosis. For a second, the world stood still. Leah put her hand to her ear, as if checking if she was still whole, then her eyes widened. Far away, in the hallway, an old clock ticked the hours with a constant ticking, which had always been there but had never reached her. This time, it did. The girl blinked several times, confused, then pointed in the direction of the sound, as if asking, "What is that?" Her mouth opened and a hoarse, unsteady sound, full of strangeness, escaped. The word came halfway, but it was the first half of a whole life. Tessa put her hands to her mouth, unable to hold back her tears. Before they could process the miracle, the front door opened. Helena and Lorenzo rushed in, arguing about something at work, until the heavy silence was broken by their daughter's fragile voice calling out, "Mommy, ... double quotes. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't loud, but it was real. The mother froze, the bags fell from her hand, her eyes filled with instant tears. Lorenzo put his hand to his mouth, as if trying to hold the world back from collapsing. For a few seconds, no one moved, until Helena saw the dark object in Tessa's hand, saw the metallic glint of the instrument, saw a little dried blood on her daughter's ear. Panic replaced gratitude. "What the hell did you do to my girl?" she screamed, running towards them. The order came automatically. "Lorenzo, call the hospital, and the agency. This is absurd." Tessa tried to explain, her voice trembling, that she had found an old obstruction, that Leah was listening, that it could have been ignored for years. But nobody wanted to listen, not yet. The girl, in turn, tried to repeat sounds, touching her own chest as she felt the vibration. In the midst of the chaos, she looked at Tessa and whispered, with effort, "Tessa, no accusation could erase that." The truth now had sound. At the hospital, amidst exams, CT scans, and stunned stares, the confirmation came cold and technical. There was a record of an old exam where a doctor had noted the presence of a dense mass in the child's ear canal, suggesting further investigation. No follow-up was made. The request was forgotten in some system, while the family continued to hear the same phrase. "She was born deaf. It's irreversible." When Helena saw the report, her defenses began to crumble. It wasn't Tessa against medicine. It was her, as a mother, facing the fact that her daughter could have heard sooner if someone had paid attention. The au pair, who was almost accused, had, in fact, been the only one who truly saw the girl. The next day, the Moretti house was no longer the same. Leah woke up early, walked through the house as if she were discovering the world anew. She touched the walls, clapped her hands, and was fascinated by the sound of water falling into the sink. Helena followed closely, crying silently, feeling guilt, relief, and gratitude mixed together. Lorenzo, quieter than ever, tried to find words that didn't yet exist. Tessa, for her part, mentally packed her things, convinced that she would have to leave, until she heard her name echoing softly down the hallway, coming from the girl's mouth, and soon after, from her mother's choked voice. "Tessa, please stay." That house, once so organized and quiet, began to have other sounds. The crooked laughter of a girl discovering her first words. The cries of a mother learning to ask for forgiveness. The relieved sigh of a father who finally decided to be truly present. Tessa didn't become a doctor, didn't receive medals, didn't make headlines in newspapers. But it was through the simple hands and silent courage of an au pair that a truth ignored for years found space to reveal itself. Sometimes, what changes a life is not who has the most titles, but who has the greatest willingness to see what no one else sees. If this story touched your heart, I invite you to subscribe to the channel to continue receiving narratives that speak of courage, small miracles, and decisions that change destinies. And tell me in the comments, where in the world are you watching this story from today, and what did it awaken in you? Your voice matters, and like Leah, perhaps it's time to let it be heard.